Hello, today we're going to watch how the UN is holding back the Sahara Desert. If you're not already a member of the cult, hit those buttons below. Just remember, we are a good cult. Let's get into the video.
2 years ago, before the work, this was a barren wasteland. Nothing had been grown here for 40 years. When the UN World Food Program told the villagers that they were going to bring this land back as part of the Great Green Wall, they said it was impossible. But here we are in Africa, in the desert at the northern edge of Senegal, and life has returned. And the stakes couldn't be higher, because when the soil washes away and land becomes a desert, then people leave. They head to the cities, and places like this just fall apart.
It's so important for us to take a central look at nature. Incorporating nature into our lives should be our first thought. We need to think of a system where Earth and all of its inhabitants are all included in a circular figure. No hierarchy that we're above anything else. We live on this planet together, and we need to treat the planet as such.
But thanks to the work of the villagers and the World Food Program, using techniques and systems that I'm going to tell you about in this video, the tides have changed, and natural wealth is growing back and growing the livelihoods of the people here.
Beauty is all around us. We just need to open our eyes to it.
Welcome to Senegal. I'm here during the rainy season to see the work of the Great Green Wall of Africa.
You've heard about the Great Wall of China, but what about the Green Wall of Africa?
My wife and I, we started in Dakar, a city of about 4 million people. It's the biggest city in Senegal. It is the westernmost point of the entire continent of Africa. I met with the World Food Program there in Dakar to discuss our trip. So then we drove with the World Food Program. It was about a 7-hour drive through the Sahel. The ecosystem really changed a lot. In the southern part, the trees were larger, dispersed amongst the millet fields. As we drove north, the trees became smaller and smaller.
It's crazy the amount of diversity in Africa. Maybe just us living in the United States, or me in general, we don't realize how big of a continent Africa really is, and how many different subgroups, or I don't know what they call them over there actually are in the African continent. Similar to the United States, we have a bunch of different states, and each state has its own diversity, and I'm sure it's the same with Africa. I'm so excited to see where Africa goes in the future.
This land is as green as it gets right now for the whole year. I've never seen this many grazing animals. The entire Sahel is like one big free-range pasture.
Animals and nature living together in symbiosis. What a beautiful way to live.
So we drove up to the point where it transitions to the Sahara Desert, which is the Senegal River. We are here at the Senegal River, which is the border between Senegal on this side, Mauritania on the other. When you look from space, you can actually see the lateral sand dunes of Mauritania where they hit the Senegal River. The Senegal River is really the divide between the Sahara and the Sahel in many parts of the river.
The Senegal River makes me think of the river of Styx and hell. Sahel, hell. Pretty similar.
The Senegal River here, it serves not only as the border between Senegal and Mauritania, and not only as the border between the Sahel and the Sahara, but if this river zone is vegetated, it could represent the first line of defense of the Great Green Wall of Africa.
Nature is important, and this crucial juncture between river, desert, and landscape on the other side can really make this green wall a possibility.
The Great Green Wall of Africa is a vision, the project to plant a barrier of trees across the entire width of the continent of Africa, from Senegal to Djibouti. And the purpose of this Great Green Wall is to stop the southern expansion of the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert has expanded about 10% in the last 100 years. So we have the Sahara Desert, then we have the Sahel, then we have the savanna, and then we have the rainforest. The design is to actually have a barrier of trees to stop the expansion of the desert southward. So I'm here on the ground at the Great Green Wall to show how we can restore degraded landscapes, we can keep the Sahara at bay, create abundance, have people living here and thriving.
This Great Green Wall seems so great when explained. But how does this actually practically get put into use? Well, let's find out.
We are here at WFP project site. We are in a very degraded land area. In the early beginning, when we presented the process and the idea, the community didn't believe. They said, no, this is not true. This is not feasible. We cannot recover this land. More than 40 years, we are here. Nothing is growing on this side.
Notice all the plants behind him.
The process started with the community-based participatory planning. By the end of this process, it was agreed that one of the major action is the land reclamation or land recovery project. This is a sort of school. They come to learn how to improve land. The people believe and they are convinced and they are also committed. You can see.
The best part about this to me is this is a community event. This is many people working together to achieve a common goal. Many hands make for light work.
At WFP, we have planted and rehabilitated some 300,000 hectares of land over the past years. And what you see here is 30 hectares out of those 300,000. This is a contribution to the Great Green Wall because the Great Green Wall is like a patchwork, a mosaic of forests that together create this wall that will protect the Sahel from being encroached by the Sahara Desert. We're working on degraded land and bringing it back to life. And that takes a few stages.
It's no easy feat, but they are literally turning the desert into green, luscious landscape.
And that takes a few stages. When we start with a soil like this one that we see right here, okay, that is crusted, that is sun-baked, that cannot support any kind of life because it is literally hard as cement. There's no way seeds or any plants can actually take root here. We bring it back to life and we bring it back to production so that it can feed people and it can feed the communities and communities can start thriving again.
This approach is beautiful as well. They're not giving these people fish, they're teaching them how to fish. They're not taking this landscape and changing it themselves. They're teaching the community of people that actually are affected by this landscape how to take care of it themselves. And that is a beautiful thing.
We need to create water harvesting structures that maintain the water on site. If we look at the soil the way it is right now, the water cannot stay here. So it rains and it flows away. So these half moons, they are the first step in this rehabilitation process, in this soil build-up process. On this site here, we have 7,500 half moons, each of which has a 4-meter diameter. This takes one person to dig 1 half moon per day.
I've also heard them called green smiles when they're filled up with plants because they look like green smiles. They're taking the core lessons of permaculture, which if you don't know what permaculture is, there's many core lessons, but one of them is water conservation. So instead of just having concrete grounds, they have places where the water can pool and plants can grow. They're using the resources they have available to their advantage.
This site has been dug by a team of 150 people. So how does the half moon work? The rain basically comes here and we have put the half moons on contour lines, which means the rain, when it falls to the ground, it flows into this area here, which is a little bit lower so that it retains the water. And we create this embankment, okay, that's a little bit higher up and make sure that the water doesn't overflow, okay, and it stays here and it feeds these plants.
This system is using water retention from natural resources like the rain to ensure that these half moons stay wetter for longer. Instead of the rain just falling willy-nilly, They're controlling where the rain goes and how long it stays for.
So we are mainly using local species like the sorghum and the millet that actually has been domesticated here many thousands of years ago. So it actually comes from the Sahel and produce a maximum quantity of biomass as well. So they are perfect to rehabilitate the land while feeding the people at the same time.
Biomass is basically just leftover plant matter that they can use to compost in the ground. Eventually, over time, they're going to use these plants as fertilizer for new plants to come. It's all cycles in a system meant to be sustainable. They're also using native plants, which is a huge bonus. These plants have already had hundreds of thousands of years to naturalize in the area that they're grown in. So they need less water and they're adapted to the climate they're in. If you have the right plants, it's more hammock time, meaning it's less work you have to put in.
This is nothing new. We have not invented a technology here. The Half Moon technology is actually an endogenous technology to the Sahel and has been forgotten over time. We have rescued it from the past.
I think the wildest part to me here is they're not inventing new technology. They're just rediscovering ways that it's always been done. We have these ideas available to us. We just need to take inspiration from ancient cultures, from cultures that we may have looked over, from people that we may have looked over. Just because they live in a different time doesn't mean they didn't have knowledge that can benefit us today. We need to look towards natives for many facets of our culture to integrate the technology that we have right now with their ancient technology.
So the sorghum that you can see behind us actually grew only with rainwater. Around 10 to 15% of water that will be caught here will enter the ground and will recharge the groundwater tables. That way we actually achieve a balance of water. So we are not depleting the water resources, but we're making sure that we keep enough water in the ground for future generations.
So not only are they using these half moons to benefit their culture and the landscape, the plants that they're planting are actually benefiting the water table too. With the way they're looking at water retention, they can ensure the water table is good for many generations down the line. I really do think the whole purpose of life is to plant that tree whose shade you may never sit under.
Then we have another system that mainly consists of planting lines. We have horticulture beds where we can plant tomatoes, okra, and so on. Here we have trenches where we have planted moringa, we have planted pigeon pea, and we have planted also some okra that has grown wildly here. And the idea here is that we have biomass trenches that will provide biomass as the system grows.
So not only are they using these smiles or half moons to plant plants in, they're also building rows and trenches. These are other great ways to use the natural resource, the rain, to their advantage, so that the rain flows and gets all of these spaces wet, but they're able to hold the rain for much longer in each section. All of it has its purpose in the whole. The rain feeds the plants grow, the plants get chopped down for biomass, in turn feeding the new plants, and the cycle starts all over again.
Between these trenches, we have planting pits where we have planted fruit trees. We have guava, citrus. This is just the very first step in this pilot. We'll also be using other native species that we'll be planting in the pits that will drive the rejuvenation of the soil and the protection of the soil as the system starts growing into abundance and producing food and life for the people here. In its mature state, this system will look like a forest, forest lines that will be producing biomass and fruit, and we'll have other lines in between where we'll be producing horticulture, vegetables. This is exactly the way nature works.
Syntropic farming, permaculture, regenerative agriculture, all of these systems are being used to the advantage of the green wall in Africa. Each half moon would have a guild with a fruit tree at the center. A guild is basically just supporting plants for the tree that's planted at the center. So there's a main tree like an apple tree or a peach tree or a mango, and then supporting plants around it. So things like bushes or vines or ground cover, each one having their purpose to either put nitrogen back, to attract pollinators, or just to be another food source in the guild. All these plants thriving together and working in symbiosis.
We came across syntropic farming, which is a type of conservation agriculture that has been developed in Brazil based on global indigenous knowledge. In the whole world, many indigenous populations have a similar way traditionally to do agriculture that is different from conventional agriculture and which mimics forest dynamics.
The whole key is to look at nature and how forests just naturally come about. These systems are not reinventing the wheel. They're emulating nature, which has a divine intelligence, whatever you want to call it. It already has systems in place that have ground covers, it has vines that grow up in the trees, there's bushes, and then there's larger trees that populate the area. The forest is very beautiful, but not all of it's edible. With the systems that we're trying to implement here, we're making places that are not only lush and green, but have a purpose of being edible as well.
So if we look at the vastness of this area here, we can plant 10,000s of trees into these structures.
Imagine all those fruit trees growing in a place that used to be literally a desert. The amount of lush green that's not only psychologically nourishing, but literally nourishing to our bodies with the food it produces. What more could you want?
Sometimes you come in the villages, you don't see nobody. You can just see some animals to say, okay, I think people are here. Usually every year after the rainy season, most of the young people migrate to Dakar and other big town in Senegal. This is the internal or the local migration. Some leave Senegal to go to Spain. What they are going to do there? Agriculture, that they leave behind. They go to harvest apple there, while they leave the same activity here.
In order for Africa to progress, these people need to start doing labor in their own country. And with this system of having fruit trees planted, these people wouldn't have to leave their home communities. They could build their own communities and thrive from this great green wall.
Before, they were thinking about how to migrate, but they told me now they don't think about that. With this borehole we put in place, now we are going to work 12 months on vegetable production. Now these young boys who are very key for the village security, for the village development, now don't need to go to live just the old people in the village.
Obviously, Africa is a different continent, but I think in the United States, what we lack the most is community. We have an epidemic of loneliness, which is stemming from a lack of community. There's many different things you can build community around, but I think the best thing, because we all have to eat, is building community around gardening or growing fruit trees or growing vegetables. Imagine if downtowns were filled with fruit trees instead of just oak trees. How beautiful would it be to be able to go downtown and just pick a fresh fruit off the tree and eat it? Not only would it help the people who are homeless, but it also beautify the cities and put more jobs in the economy to help maintain these trees. A great way for us to build community and get back to earth is realizing that we need to plant more fruit trees and more vegetables. We need to learn how to grow these things again. The decentralization of farming. And obviously, it doesn't have to happen all at once. But what I used to tell people is if you've ever made dinner and wanted a fresh herb, there's something about going out and picking rosemary or picking basil and adding it to your dinner. The fresh herbs that you can just go outside, know that you grew them yourselves. There's gratification to that, and it also tastes better. The produce that you're getting at the store is not fully ripe, but when you grow it yourself, you can ensure that it's fully ripe. Not only is that more nutritious for you, but it also tastes better at the same time.
Now they will contribute to the local dynamic of the community. Now they are together, they have social cohesion.
In the United States, the farmers are of the older generation and they're dying out. This knowledge of growing food is something that we cannot lose. We really need to teach it in schools. It needs to be something that's ubiquitous, knowledge, at least a little bit, that lives within everybody. We all have to eat, so we should all learn how to grow food as well.
Now, this project was really, really interesting because the World Food Program wanted to demonstrate how you could take the most devastated areas and turn them back into resilient food-producing locations. And they specifically placed their project on a very degraded landscape that had been taken down to bare, compacted earth. This is actually the front line of the Great Green Wall of Africa. The Senegal River, at least for this region, that's where you're going to have your real true dividing line between the Sahara and the Sahel. So the work of the WFP is solving this problem directly here on the ground with the Great Green Wall of Africa.
If we can turn deserts green again, we can do anything. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.